Welcome to episode 113 of Warriors Unmasked. Today, my partner Clint Malarchuk and I sit down with American contemporary artist, author, composer, multi-instrumentalist and music producer, and founder of the nonprofit Rescue 11, Mr. Jimmi Toro. Jimmy will take a deep dive into his journey from being sexually abused at a very young age to being buried alive with another dead human until almost death himself. And at age 45, having his first of many major panic attacks that would continue for the following 14 years, to getting his first memory of the abuse the following year, and starting a healing journey that would be completely transformative. This episode is bound to take you from heartbreak, sadness, hurt, and sorrow to feeling compassion, heart warmth, understanding, and full of hope. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another amazing episode of Warriors Unmasked as we sit down with Mr. Jimmi Toro.
You're listening to Warriors Unmasked, where you'll hear powerful stories about courage, perseverance, and overcoming mental illness from athletes both professional and amateur, coaches, military personnel, first responders, and even the people next door. Welcome mental health advocates and your host, former NCAA first team All-American and professional goaltender, professional speaker, and life coach, Chuck Thus. And former National Hockey League goaltender, best-selling author, professional speaker, and suicide survivor, Clint Malarchuk.
This episode of Warriors Unmasked has been brought to you by the American Hat Company. American Hat Company has been making the finest cowboy hats for the past 106 years. We are proud to be Americans, and we are proud to wear American hats. For more information, check them out on the web at americanhat.net. This week's episode of Warriors Unmasked has been brought to you by the Shift Group. Shift Group is turning athletes into sales professionals. Is your company looking to hire driven, competitive former athletes? Are you a former college or pro hockey player or former collegiate athlete in any sport and trying to figure out what's next? Consider a meaningful career in technology sales and let the Shift Group guide you every step of the way. Reach out to them directly at www.shiftgroup.io or email them directly at jr@shiftgroup.io to get started today. Are you a business owner looking to spice up your brand? Look no further than Pete Thus at Talbot Marketing. Pete can help you with all your promotional product and corporate apparel needs. From pens to tumblers and polos to jackets, Talbot Marketing is your one-stop shop for anything you need branded with your logo. Reach out to Pete today at 519-494-7629. Multi-instrumentalist, music producer, and founder of the nonprofit Rescue 11, Mr. Jimmi Toro. Jimmy, welcome to Warriors Unmasked. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate your giving me an opportunity to share this message to more people.
Great name, Jimmi Toro. I love it.
I had a friend in the music industry who I'd come into his studio and he'd call me Jimmi Toro in an Italian accent like I was a gangster.
Yeah, El Toro, Toro.
Like, let's not let that stick.
Jimmy, to say that you've had an interesting journey to this point is probably an understatement. And one that to say that it's been full of trauma is probably another understatement. And just recently, you've come out with a new book called Heal, which we're going to get to because I want to hear all about that, as do our listeners. But let's wind the clock back to Jimmi Toro at 2, 3, and 4 years old, because that's really where this journey started. And I'm going to pass it over to you to start where the journey is at 3, 4 years old. What was it like to be Jimmi Toro at that age, and what was life like at that point?
Well, how about we start with this idea that, so if you take a child abuser, right, and you can say, well, maybe there's a father who gets mad and beats his child. Well, that is child abuse. But if that same father rapes his child, it's a lot worse. If that individual who abuses child enjoys doing that, they're like the ultimate sadist. A sadist definition is somebody who enjoys inflicting pain on another. And they are also the ultimate cowards because they pick on little children. And it's interesting to understand that these creeps, I have a hard time calling them human, they enjoy and are addicted to doing this behavior. from the mouth of a convicted sex felon. To me, a little child is no different than a ham sandwich. A ham sandwich is an object that satisfies my need for hunger. A little child is an object that satisfies my need to dominate and sexually abuse. From the mouth of another predator, I am as addicted to abusing children as I would be if I was on cocaine. These creeps are unbelievable. It's hard for most good folks, all good folks actually, it's hard to understand how one human can do this to another, especially a little child. Well, they don't just do this to little children. They do it repeatedly. They join groups. They do it individually. Two types of groups there are out there, basically speaking, would be is you have these ritualistic sadist adults who get together in some twisted religion and they perform their ordinances and their traditions and whatnot. And often at the center of these things is the sacrifice of a child. Well, they may say they do this and that, and they wear their robes and they do all this kind of stuff. To me, it's just a cop out and a cover up for them to participate in their deviant behavior. And they're secretive. They do their damnedest to not get caught, because if they get caught, their life is pretty much ruined. And they are in your community. Now, I can't guarantee that they are in your community, but by and large, they are in pretty much most communities. And you might hear about the Jeffrey Epstein types of child abusers, and they make the news because they're rich and famous and they hang out with politicians and Hollywood folks. Fine, that does go on in that realm. But what matters more is that this goes on right in your community, and it's underground. And just in the last year in Salt Lake City and surrounding area, ex-mayor was busted for child abuse, an ex-assistant attorney general, a coach. Just a couple of weeks ago, they busted this guy who started a gymnasium for kids to learn gymnastics, little boys and girls. He had little cameras hidden in their dressing rooms. I mean, these creeps are right out in the open. They might be somebody you say hi to at the grocery store, and they are excellent at hiding what they do, and they are addicted. They wake up every day seeing how I can abuse, torture, kill, or rape your child. This is what they do. And this may sound sensationalistic, but this is what they do. There's another type of group of these creeps, and it's more like a business, right? So if you own a brothel and you have customers, typically men, who will come in, pay you money, and they get to go into a room, have sex with a girl. It's pretty typical, right? Well, these types of organizations exist with child abuse. And these creeps have their preferences. And so they may say, well, I want a 4-year-old white, blonde, blue-eyed boy, or I want a 6-year-old Asian girl. And there are people who provide that for them. Well, if there are these groups that their commodity and their product are these children for these creeps that pay money for it, these children often age out. Often with boys, they'll age out around age 8 or 9. In my case, that was the case. Girls, unfortunately, get abused a whole lot more than boys and for longer. And sometimes it's not uncommon that a little girl can get abused thousands of times, be raped. And then her body just gets so ruined, she's no good anymore. So they'll kill her and harvest her organs and make even more money. Well, if these kids age out or be killed or etc., they have to keep replenishing their supply of kids to keep their business going. And they make lots of money, and they're powerful people. And so often they're very clever. They're very good at what they do. I have a buddy in Fort Worth, Texas, who when he was young, he's our age, when he was young, there were a group of pedophiles who became part of the Boy Scouts of America, and they had in their little group of pedophiles some police officers who were also pedophiles. And they would strategically go to homes where there were single mothers, and they would go and say, hey, let us, we're the Boy Scouts, let us be your father figure to your boy. What single mother back then in the 60s, 70s wouldn't say no to that? And so they're clever, they're deviant, and they also, these creeps, you also will find them is they gravitate towards, they will work for orphanages, they will become teachers at school, they go where the kids are. And so, and another thing of note relative to this is most kids who get abused, high 90%, are abused by somebody they know. And so with all these facts, if you will, my childhood was one of a group of families in a certain town in California who were involved in the sexual ritualistic abuse rings. They would get together, they're in churches, in basements of churches, in compounds, in people's backyards where there was not a lot of houses where they could do their creepy stuff. They wore their robes, they had their rituals and whatnot. And at the center of almost all their rituals was torture and abuse of children. And they're clever bastards. They don't get satisfied with just doing the same torture to the same kid over and over and over. Well, they got to mix it up, right? So, like, one of my things that happened to me, I was about 4 years old. They buried me in this coffin, and a couple other kids in other coffins. And, well, that's not clever enough. You know, it doesn't make the kids scream enough. So in this particular coffin, they had a dead adult body in there. They had cut it from like its neck all the way down to its private area, and ripped the guts out and spread the ribs apart. And so now you have this cavity, and so they stick these kids in this coffin, in this dead body, and you shut the lid. And the poor little kid just screams to death and bangs on its fist till they're bloody. Well, it's even worse than that, right? So sometimes they try not to kill the kid, so they'll torture him to a point, you know, just like good torturers will do, right? And imagine being a little kid scared to death. You're going to suffocate, pretty much die in this situation. And then the lid opens after you're exhausted. What do you see? Well, you see laughing adults, which is just as sick as can be. And so from age about 3 to age about 8, I went through a whole bunch of these things. Now, another thing to note is that if you're a little kid, anybody kind of, but let's say kid, if you're a little kid and let's say little girl gets raped, awful, awful, awful. Let's say right on the heels of that abuse, she has a mother to go to who loves her and will provide her safety and comfort. That kid can take that trauma and literally release it out of its body right then and there. The number one thing a little child wants when they are being abused is safety, by far, the number one thing. Well, if your parents are your abusers, like my dad was part of this ring, or if your guardian or whoever, if you have nowhere to go for safety, you literally store all that in your little body. And you can store it and suppress it for decades. It's not uncommon for adult males who go through something like this to suppress this for decades, and it comes tumbling back in your early 50s. That's not uncommon. And for women, it seems that it comes back a little earlier, let's say. And so for all those decades, and this is similar to my case, I stored all of that. It's good to understand that you don't just store the memory of it. When it comes back as an adult and you relive that horror, you relive the pain, the scared, the suffocate. You relive all of it, the sights, the sounds, everything. And back when the little kid was panicked to death, those hormones rushed through his body, that little kid's body. Cortisol, adrenaline just pumped through, that fight or flight hormone, freeze hormones. All of that comes back as an adult, every bit of it. And you relive the horror and the pain of all of it. And it's, PTSD and whatnot. There's a acronym with a C in front of that, CPTSD, C standing for child. But it's the same thing. Military folks experience PTSD. It's post-trauma coming back. It's a fascinating idea how that works physiologically in a human's body.
So when you look back now, Jimmy, as a grown adult, and you think back to Jimmi Toro at 4, 5, 6, 7, how did that young person even begin to process what was going on? Or was there no processing at all? It was almost just turning everything off and merely existing.
Yeah, you turn it off, it becomes your normal. There's not that many out there, but occasionally you'll find a video where a child who's right in the midst of that horror gets interviewed. And the child will talk about awful things like, yeah, we killed babies. We slit their throats. My dad would hang them upside down and drain their blood, and then we would eat them. It's like, it doesn't get any worse than that. And the little kid will talk about it very matter-of-factly because that's their norm. Little kids are threatened. Little kids are told in abuse situations things like, it's our secret. The threats are very real. I've witnessed other kids die. And so they will do what they have to do to protect their secrecy and to foster their addiction.
Jimmy, I've heard of child molesters, child abuse, whatever. But this, when I read your bio and about you being put into a coffin at 4 years old with a dead body, I almost fell off my chair, sir. And this is eye opening. That it's just so hard to comprehend that there are people that sick to do that kind of damage or do anything like that to not just a child, to a human being.
Yeah, that alone is a shocker. The other shocker is that this happens a lot more than most people think. And it happens today, and it's rampant. There was a compound somewhere in Poland, right? And so to satisfy their need to have little children come into their place, they might kidnap, let's say they kidnap little Susie. Well, the cops will be like, hey, there's an alert out for little Susie who's been kidnapped. They'll take little Susie and they'll fly little Susie with an adult to a country in the world where it's legal for men to marry little girls. They'll bring Susie back with a whole new passport and a whole new name. Now little Susie is Janet. Nobody's looking for Janet. I mean, they are clever. And their clientele is high end. They paid lots of money to come into these compounds. And you've heard of Pizzagate and all that bit? Pizzagate is just a little bit that's come out, they're not going to call an establishment and say, hey, on Thursday, I want to come in and have a 4-year-old little boy and do what I want with it. They're not going to say that because their phone might be tapped and whatnot. Instead, they'll say, they'll use code, whether it be a type of pizza or a certain food or whatever. That's what that's all about. So when a person is scared to death, their body fills with adrenaline. And so adrenochrome is it's adrenaline filled blood. And these creeps will drink that blood because it gives them a certain high, right? And others of these creeps will want to drink children's blood because they feel, it's suggested that it'll make them live longer because they'll have young blood in their body, right? So the more you can scare a kid, the better. Some of these creeps will get these kids. And I remember years ago, I was reading a book called POW. It's about the prisoners of war in Vietnam. And one prisoner was being tortured, and the prisoner came and stuck his finger in the guy's eye and turned it around, which is awful torture in itself, right? And the prisoner noted that when the torturer did that to him, he was sexually aroused. These creeps, if there's not blood, death, drinking the blood, etc., and sex involved, they're not satisfied.
Are they ever satisfied? It's an addiction.
No, I don't know the numbers in it, this and that, but the pedophiles, the creeps that go down that road, I imagine the number is next to zero, those that actually reform and change.
So, Jimmy, is there any knowledge as far as the legal system around the world of these things going on? And if so, is there just no desire to stop it, or is it so corrupt that the legal system is somewhat involved in it, so therefore they're not going to put their hands in it and, for lack of better terms, get blood on their hands for trying to stop it?
Okay, I don't know all the nuances to be able to answer your question, but I was talking to a guy just the other day, and I said, go into your neighborhood and look on the sex offender registry, which will show how many sex offenders live in your neighborhood. He did it in a 3-block area, and there were 22 of them. I'm in a little conservative town. In a 1-mile area, there were 12 of them. And in the U.S., on the registered sex offender list, that the national average per state, let's say, might be around 200, 150, 200, 250, somewhere in there, of registered sex offenders per 100,000 people. And then you go to states like Oregon or Montana, where it's closer to 600 or 700 per 100,000 people. Now, these are the ones who've been caught. I don't know the number, nobody does, but I imagine the number who have not been caught are triple, quadruple that, if not more. And when you go down the rabbit hole of wanting to molest a child and you don't get enough, where do you go? You go deeper, you go deeper, you go deeper. Pretty soon, you're doing the most god-awful things to children because you're addicted. Even many sex offenders say that, it's more about the power, the addiction to the power and this and that. I agree that's there, but I don't agree that they use even that as a cover-up for their sexual deviancy.
I've heard that child molesters cannot be cured.
I've heard that too. Now, I don't know if it's a fact, but I believe it's true. Especially you drop down that hole a little ways. Yep. I mean, even in the prison systems, they will kill those people. Even the worst prisoners, the worst murderers, and they'll kill those people.
Yeah. So, Jimmy, as you continue to age, and I think you mentioned that around the age of 9 or 10, you quote unquote aged out. So, take us through that process. How do you integrate back into society with all of this trauma at such a young age?
Keep in mind that I suppressed all of that. So I'm 60 now, right? At age 45, so 15 years ago, I had my first massive panic attack. I thought I was literally having a heart attack. I could not even get out of bed and go across the floor. My whole body was uncontrollably shaking. My heart was just racing off the charts. My throat was dry. I literally felt like I was going to die. I called the ambulance. They took me in, did the whole workup on my heart after I calmed down. And, well, Mr. Toro, there's nothing wrong. You have a healthy heart and all this kind of stuff. And that began a journey of literally 14 years of having these massive panic attacks with no memory of what happened to me. I had probably 3 or 4 a week average. And they oh my gosh, they're the worst. And then early last year, 2022, going into my 15th year of these, I had a first memory come back. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's like, holy hell, what I remembered. And when the memories come back, they are vivid and sharp. And they are the emotion of that event that you remember. It's so poignant. It's so real. And I was glad to have some memory because I could make sense of what the hell was going on with me for all these years. But it was so awful, I didn't want to have another one. So for almost the whole year of 2022, I had one after another, almost daily, hundreds and hundreds. Imagine you're like a driver on a bus, and it's adult you. You've got hundreds of little yous in the back of your bus. And if you were molested or abused or whatever, etc., 200 times or whatever it is, you got 200 little yous back there. And you have to literally go back to each one. And you have to visit, revisit, relive the abuse, and you have to figure out how to heal from it, which we can get into. But that's what it requires. And when you go back there, you can be triggered. Often people with PTSD are triggered and brings this stuff up. Or the awful thing about this is it just comes unannounced at 2 a.m, right in the middle of a business meeting. It just comes, which was my case. And now, not everybody experiences these episodes as physically painfully horrific as I do. Many, it's more of a mental thing, and they want to commit suicide and this and that. But for some reason, mine were just off the charts, physically painful. And when this happens, when you go back, there's a lot of therapy around, a lot of opinions from therapists, counselors, psychologists, etc., about what modality to use. There's a lot of body work, tapping, eye movement stuff, breathing techniques. Some advocate forms of yoga. Some even advocate some drama, reenacting the thing that happened to you, like on a stage, etc. And then there's the more of the talk therapy where you're working with a psychologist who guides you back to that. But the fact is when you go back, whether you're triggered or it just happens, or you show up and say, let's go back there. That's another way of going back there. When you go back there, you are trying to name the emotion of it more than what is actually happening. Although you do get into what's happening to little you. Well, is the emotion suffocation? Is it Is it torture? Is it sexual molestation? Is it rape? And not every trauma is that awful type of hell. Sometimes the trauma can be, well, I cried out over and over and over and nobody believed me. A little kid just crying for that. Sometimes the trauma can be extreme sadness because nobody was there to comfort that little kid. Sometimes the trauma can be loneliness. I mean, there were 10 kids in our family and all kinds of chaos going when I was brought up. And cry out, nobody believed you. That alone is trauma. So there's all kinds of unique traumas, from actual hardcore abuse to sadness. One of the traumas I had was had to clean up was the fact that I had to carry this weight of all this abuse on me for so long. So they're all very unique, and you got to go back to them, and you got to solve them. Or we can get into that. I would feel it so deeply, and I would name it. There's a vernacular of name it to tame it. It's like, if you want to go back and tame it, name it. And well, you're naming the emotion. Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling abused? Am I feeling just horrendously awful? Am I feeling whatever it is? And then you have to keep yourself grounded in the present. That's what a lot of these therapies are about. It's like when you go back there, you can get so lost, adult you going back to find that little kid, that you want to stay grounded. And the one thing that helped me the most in all of this goes back to that original thought that when a child is being abused, the one thing they want is safety. When you're an adult going back there, the best thing that happened for me was to have anybody, wife, a spouse, a friend, anybody in that room and just holding their hand. The best thing by far for me. Because it kept me grounded in the fact that I'm here in a safe place with somebody. Because I'm going back to a place that is not safe at all. Sometimes I found that little kid right away. Other times it took days. And then I didn't go back as an adult to rescue that kid. I went back as an adult to comfort, to whisper in that kid's ear, basically say, you can find safety. And the magical part of all this healing, which is just fascinatingly magical, is that little boy, in my case, can make up whatever the hell he wants to get out of that tough situation. Magic. One case, I was a little kid in a room, and this lady came to grab me. She started out nice, like, oh, hi, little Jimmy, and then I didn't want to go, and her face went from nice to just off the joint evil. She went to grab me, and I knew, because I knew the screams in the other room, I knew where she was taking me, and I'd been in there before, and I did not want to go again. And I was able to find that little kid in this extreme pain I was in, and whisper, get behind him and whisper in his ears, what do you want to do? Give him a little confidence. He said, I want to freeze her. And she literally froze in a block of ice, like mid-grab. And we were able to get the hell out of there. And I held that little boy and we just walked for I don't know how long. And so that particular episode, and there are hundreds of these, and they were all absolutely unique. But when that was resolved, as magical as it sounds, that pain literally just left me. That particular episode that's been stored in my brain and my body for decades literally is gone to this day. It is the coolest thing. But see, people who live with trauma, like there's the classic case of a young girl who will be raped as a kid, and then when she gets older, she will date men who abuse her, right? That's pretty classic. Well, why? Well, that's her familiarity, as awful as it is. So when you have experienced trauma, you sometimes have two awful choices. One is I can live with this, what is familiar to me, and still have all the anxiety still affect me awfully. Or I can go and face it head on, which is harder and more horrific and more painful. Most people opt to live with it.
What kind of therapies have you done, Jimmy? I'm assuming quite a few.
I did one. So I was fortunate to get with an amazing psychologist who specialized in sexual ritualistic abuse. And she guided me through this process. Over time, I could get to where I could do it on my own with somebody in the room. And it worked. It took, the first few ones, first month or so of this, it took me a little bit to figure out the magic, that it was adult me, literally going to find this little me and to get in touch with what exactly I was feeling. But once I got into the rhythm of that, it worked.
How old are you when you started that therapy?
At the beginning of 2022. And for most of that year, I had one episode after another. As an adult, when these episodes come back, the cortisol and the adrenaline rush right through your system, as awful as it did when you were a kid. My health went from very healthy to, at the end of that, I'm thin naturally, and I lost 30 pounds. I could barely walk from one room to another.
So it was grueling.
Oh, it really affects your health. I remember after my last episode, I remember about a month later, I started to get my health back slowly. I said, okay, I'm going to try doing a push-up, just a push-up. And I got down and I lowered myself and I collapsed and I was wiped out for days. Literally wiped out. My whole body, it just, fast forward it's been about 6 months now since the last episode, six or 7 months. I ran my first mile just the other day. I felt so elated. So I've slowly, methodically went from barely being able to walk from one room to another to a little further, and so on and so on.
So, Jimmy, you had mentioned that there were hundreds of these episodes of grown Jimmy going back to find little Jimmy and working through that. As we speak today, do you feel confident that all of those individual little Jimmys, that you've been able to go back and rescue them, to find them, caress them, and help heal them? Is that part of the journey that is now in the rearview mirror? So now you can start to heal the grown-up Jimmy?
Yes, because the very last episode I had at the end of last year was off the charts. I've been into the ER room so many times because as a little kid, you feel they're going to kill you. When that comes back as an adult, you feel you're going to die. Imagine a big hand that you can't get out of just slowly pushing you underwater. The panic that comes through your body. You know that if you don't get a breath, you're going to die. The last one was so off the charts awful. I'm surprised I'm alive, honestly. I ended up in the ER, and I felt afterwards, that was the last one, like the climax of them all. And it was. Now, I don't know. Maybe something will come back in my future. I don't know. But from that last one till now, it's been so much better. I've been able to get my health back and my sanity back and all this. So I think it is the last one. I think I have successfully healed all of those traumas that have been stored in my body.
So out of all of this, as I mentioned when we first started, you just came out with a new book called Heal. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners a little bit. I think we now know the premise behind it, but share with us the courage, Jimmy, that it took to put this on paper. And because I have to believe that you had to relive some of those situations in order to write about healing from them. But I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but please share with us how this all came and tell us about the book, all of that, please.
Sure. At the beginning of this podcast, when I first started about what these creeps do to children, it's not an uncommon reaction. People hearing me to just be pissed off and unbelief, which I was on the heels of all this. So I'm an artist, and so I'm able to fill the book with a lot of really cool art and interpret it and whatnot. So that was fun. And I started a nonprofit called Rescue 11 in North San to go into communities and basically teach communities that these creeps exist, how to recognize it, how to recognize if kids are being abused, etc. And so I'm on a mission to share what I can about all of this. The first part of the book is much of what we talked about. What trauma is, how it works, how it's stored, how it's suppressed, how it comes back, how it manifests, how the body literally keeps all that in. When it does come tumbling back, how it's not just the memory that comes back. And then how to heal from it. And the last half of the book are 22 stories out of the hundreds I had. I picked 22 that ranged from pretty horrific to stories like, for instance, I had one where I went back to find this little guy, and the feeling was extreme sadness, super sadness, so heavy. If you've ever been that sad. And I was at like the base of this huge mountain in the meadow, kind of a classic scene, and there's this little boy coming walking. I could see him in the distance, and I figured, hey, that's little me. And I felt compelled not to go to him, which is odd. In most of these, I felt very compelled to go help rescue this kid. And he walked right by me. And I was very curious of where he was going. And I looked, and there was a female figure, like a mother figure, sitting at the base of the mountain. And it took me a minute, but okay, he's walking right towards her. Adult me went over closer, and I thought he would come right up to her and they'd have some sort of conversation. I would listen in. And no, without skipping a beat, saying a word, he walked right into her arms. She was sitting down. He walked right into her arms in a fetal position, and she held him. That's what he needed. He needed that safety in that. Now, I don't know, that particular instance is most likely a combination of a lot of sadness over a lot of days being healed, maybe even probably years beyond. And it worked. It healed. That sadness left me. So the last half of the book are 22 stories of kind of what I just described, what happened, how I went back, the pain involved, the emotion involved, and the magical healing process that happened. So that's the last half of the book.
That is absolutely incredible, Jimmy, that you had the courage and the strength to do that. And thank you for doing it, because while I don't know the vastness of what you're talking about, I have to believe that there's somebody today that's listening to this podcast that has been impacted by exactly what you're talking about.
I believe most adults have experienced some sort of trauma. You don't have to go through the rape and torture for this to affect you your whole life. Little Janet can have her pants pulled down on the playground by some bullies, and it can be very traumatic to her. Whereas another kid can get his pants pulled down, and he just laughs it off and goes on. We're all unique that way. So smaller, less, let's say, graphic traumas can happen to us. I mean, obviously, you guys know, I mean, they can happen in your adult years. You can go like you did with your accident playing hockey and having your jugular vein. It spins you into trauma, and it is hell. And how to get out of it is, now I don't know that what I went through is going to work for everybody, but I think it might. Because one interesting thing about this is that it parallels a lot of things in life. What you fear is where you should head. You know, your fears and whatnot in life, if you want to solve them, head right into them. And they're going to be painful as hell. It's like the classic story that's been told throughout history of a knight going to rescue the princess from the dragon who took the princess, right? As soon as he goes outside the castle walls, well, now there's no more safety. Now it's dangerous. And he has to head directly towards the danger to the dragon, who's even more dangerous than the journey. And then he can't just steal the princess away. He has to face the dragon, and he has to kill it. And the dragon is a formidable foe. If he does all that, amidst all the pain and the chaos and fear, and he actually makes it back with the princess inside the castle walls, well, now he has gone on his heroic journey. And trauma is, holy hell, it's for many people. It can be a heroic journey. I can do this. I can face it head on. I may need some help. I may need a hand to hold. I may need some knowledge about how trauma works, how it stores in your body, and all this, how it can literally be eliminated. How you can literally go back in the past and change the narrative, literally change the story, and provide safety that you didn't get.
What was the therapy called that you did?
I don't know that there's a particular name to it. There are lots of different nuances of it, but it's the idea of talking with the psychologist, and the psychologist helping you understand everything we talked about, so you understand how it works, and guiding you back with a lot of love and care. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to go back to an awful event and get so lost in it that you're not grounded in the present. Now, there's eye movement therapy, like where that came out of. A psychologist was working with a patient and noticed that when they were walking down a hallway, they had better luck with the patient because the movement, the walking, kept them grounded in the present. And so the eye movement, it's called EMDR. The eye movement thing is just that. You know, the therapist puts their hand back and forth. You follow with your eyes. It's just to keep you grounded in the present.
Yeah, I've done that.
I know, because if you're not careful, when you go back there, that pain, that reality of finding that little you, or even the you that was, even if it happened in your 20s or 30s and your 50s, you have to go back to that point. But that going back there, it can be, well, depending on what happened to you, it can be so horrific. You do got to be careful you don't get lost in it.
I would think if you do, Jimmy, you'd live it all over again and bring it right into the present. Is that a is that a true statement? Do you believe?
No, not necessarily. The act of going back there, you are living it in the present already. If you're not grounded in the present, or you have somebody you can hold their hand, for lack of better saying, um, I would think that you might go back there and not solve the problem, not get rid of it out of your system.
Jimmy, with it's very common with people with PTSD, traumas, whatever it might be, they end up self-medicating.
It is so awful that they become addicted to alcohol and porn and drugs and whatnot, which is so sad, because most of them, especially the ones who've been through really awful things, they never change, they never heal, they get addicted to things, they often commit suicide, or they stay in that addiction and they die. And it's so horrible, because if you're dealing with trauma and you mask it with alcohol, you just compounded your problem. Now you got to deal with alcoholism.
Yeah, I've been there.
Have you really?
Well, I'm out of it now, so that's the good news.
So, Jimmy, what does life look like now, a year ish outside of all this therapy work that you've done? What does life look like now? And share with us, looking back at those times, is there still any emotion attached to it, or is it just something that happened along in your journey?
Good question. When I think about these events, or even talk about them like this, I still experience a level of sadness. Now, sadness is an interesting emotion, right? It's not necessarily a bad emotion, like fear and all the suffocation and all the loneliness and loss, all that. But I do not experience any of the negative emotions at all. I do not have any of the hormone or cortisol dumps in my system at all. I can attest to that just from my health getting so much better in like a 6-month period. And so I'm able to talk about them in a confident way, hoping it'll spark somebody to say, hey, maybe I just need a little more confidence to go face my thing, and I can get rid of it too. That's my hope.
I am right there with you, because to think that this goes on to young boys and girls around the world. A dad of 2 girls. I can't even comprehend if I ever got a hold of somebody that would have ever done that to my daughters. What would have happened?
People who did this to me, they're long gone and dead. But if they appeared in my life today, no doubt I would kill them without even hesitating. What they did to me, not just what they did to me, what they did to many other little children, and they killed a lot of them. I wouldn't hesitate for half a second.
I'm right there with you.
So, Jimmy, where can people go to get your book, to learn a little bit more about your art? Because while you, the listener, can't see it behind Jimmy because this is audio only, I love the work that you have behind you. But where can they go to learn a little bit more about you, the work that you're doing, your book, and maybe most importantly, Rescue 11?
Yeah, so my website is Jimmi Toro, JIMMI TORO. And then the Rescue 11 website is rescue11.org. And our basic strategy with Rescue 11 is go into a community. I'm just started this, but we're already getting some progress. We go into a community and we set up a high school club at the high school, because these high school kids and younger, they are the targets. And this high school club, let's say, will become a hub to a community where these kids, with our help, they will reach out to the legislature, to the legal people in the town, to other religions, other nonprofits, to therapists, counselors, and anybody in the community that could rally around this idea of making a community where that these predators are in their community targeting their children. We also set up adult clubs, typically for folks who are retired and whatnot, and their mission is the same: it's to support the high school club and the community. But people get older and retired, and they're smart. They have time on their hands, and they need a purpose. And it's not uncommon with grandparents to know that in many cases where a little kid is being abused in a family setting, it's not uncommon for the grandparent to be the one who rats out the adult who is abusing the kid. And so these grandparents, they have kids and they have grandkids and they have kids in school, and they are as protective of their grandkids as the parents are. Sometimes they see things that the parents and uncles and aunts don't see. So that's what we're doing, is going into communities and setting up these 2 clubs of adults and high school kids, and making this awareness, teaching kids how predators get to their kids online. They're clever bastards. They'll go into a mall and they'll watch, like a lion watching a bunch of wildebeest run by. The lion can see the sick one, the young one, the maimed one, etc. They'll even pay a 14-year-old boy a bunch of money to go say hi and befriend a 14-year-old girl and invite them over. Hey, come over, we got a job for you, or a modeling opportunity or something. They are clever bastards.
Jimmi Toro, the work you're doing is needed beyond anything that I can even wrap my head around. And the fact that you're still here to do this work tells me that you have huge purpose. And I want to do everything, Klimt wants to do everything that we can do to support that purpose, because what you've been through, I can't even begin to wrap my head around. But the fact that you're here today sharing it with us, again, tells me that your purpose is bigger than all of this. It's stronger, it's more meaningful, and please just keep going. Continue to do your work, continue to shine your light, because what you are doing is needed beyond anyone's imagination. So thank you for sharing it with us today, and please, again, just keep going, because what you're going to do and what you are doing is saving one little boy, one little girl every single day, one human at a time. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jimmy. Awesome stuff.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you giving a platform to this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Warriors Unmasked. For more resources and to connect with Klimt and Chuck, go to warriorsunmasked.com. If you feel this podcast has impacted you, we ask that you subscribe and share with a friend you feel may want to hear this message.